You can just throw a party later, Clara. This is my first baby. That is what my older sister Vanessa told me. She said it while sipping an $8 iced latte, treating my wedding day like a minor inconvenience she could just erase from the calendar. So, she booked her massive gender reveal party on the exact same day, the exact same hour, and one by one, the entire Vance family chose her. My mother, my aunts, my cousins, even my father, the man who used to carry me on his shoulders, the man who looked me in the eyes and promised he would be the one to walk me down the aisle. He chose a catered country club buffet and a glass of champagne over hearing his own daughter say her vows. Only 7 people showed up to my wedding. But let me tell you, 512 messages flooded my phone the moment my family realized the massive, irreversible mistake they had made. Before I take you into the heart of this story, let me ask you a question. Have you ever realized that the people who share your blood are often the ones who twist the knife the deepest? If you have ever been abandoned or made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to protect you, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps me know I am not speaking to an empty room. Drop a comment with your city and local time right now, and tell me if you woke up to 500 apology texts from the family that betrayed you, would you answer them or would you let them burn? My name is Clara Vance. I am 28 years old, and to make you understand how I ended up standing in the freezing autumn rain, wearing a dress I sewed with my own hands, staring at 35 soaking wet, empty chairs, I need to take you back. The day of my wedding was cold. The sky over the church was a heavy, unforgiving gray, and the rain was falling hard against the stained glass windows. I was standing under the wooden awning by the entrance, clutching a small bouquet of white roses. My chest felt tight. I kept looking down the empty driveway, hoping to see my father pulling up. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out instantly, my heart pounding, praying it was a text from my dad saying he was just stuck in traffic. Instead, it was a social media notification. Vanessa was live. I tapped the screen. My hands were shaking so terribly that I almost dropped the phone onto the wet pavement. The video buffered for a second before revealing a massive, sunlit private estate. A rented mini helicopter was hovering above a perfectly manicured lawn, dropping thousands of bright pink ribbons and confetti into the clear sky. The crowd was cheering wildly. Through the screen, I saw my mother crying tears of absolute joy, holding a glass of wine. And then the camera panned. I saw my father. He was standing right next to Vanessa, holding her by the shoulders, beaming with a kind of immense pride I had never, ever seen him direct at me. The caption on the video read, "Surrounded by the only people who matter. Family is everything." She typed those exact words while I was shivering in my wedding dress, 50 miles away, listening to the rain hit the empty folding chairs. I watched the pink confetti fall on my screen, and I realized something terrifying but freeing. I had been completely erased. But the story does not end in that cold rain. Trust me. What happened next is a lesson in why you should never push a quiet person to their absolute limit. In the Vance family, there was one silent, unspoken rule that dictated absolutely everything we did. Vanessa always came first. My parents, Thomas and Eleanor, were not necessarily evil people at their core, but they were deeply, intoxicatingly obsessed with the illusion of wealth. And my older sister gave them exactly what they craved the moment she married Preston Sterling. Preston was the heir to a regional chain of overpriced steakhouses, but he made his real fortune riding the chaotic, unpredictable wave of cryptocurrency. He was the kind of guy who wore $1,000 sneakers with custom-tailored suits and made sure he talked over everyone else in the room. When he bought Vanessa a matte black luxury SUV and handed my mother a platinum credit card for her personal shopping trips, he essentially purchased my family outright. From that day forward, the Vance household worshipped at the altar of Preston Sterling. Then there was me, Clara, the younger daughter who worked as a freelance graphic designer and restored vintage books for pennies. I never cared about designer bags or corner offices. I just wanted a life that felt real. And I found that realness 3 years ago when I met Julian Hayes. Julian is an artist, not the kind who paints pretty landscapes for tourist shops. He is a metal sculptor. He works with reclaimed steel, copper, and iron, turning discarded, forgotten pieces of metal into massive, breathtaking installations. When we met, we moved into a drafty, converted warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle. It was deafeningly loud when it rained and freezing in the winter, but it was ours. Some months we ate a lot of instant noodles, but we were building a life built on pure love, and that mattered to me more than any bank account. My family, of course, viewed my life as an absolute tragedy. They never missed an opportunity to remind me of how poorly I was doing compared to the golden child, Vanessa. But the real breaking point, the exact moment I saw just how much Preston despised my husband, happened at a Thanksgiving dinner about a year before my wedding. We were all sitting around my parents' massive mahogany dining table. Preston had brought 3 bottles of imported wine, loudly making sure everyone knew they cost $500 each. Julian had brought a small, hand-forged metal rose. He spent 2 entire weeks shaping it over a blazing fire as a thank you gift for my mother. When he handed it to her, she offered a tight, fake smile and immediately set it on a side table behind a napkin holder, completely ignoring it for the rest of the night. Halfway through the turkey, Preston leaned back in his chair, swirling his expensive wine, and looked right across the table at Julian. "So, Julian," Preston said, his voice dripping with absolute condescension, "when are you going to give up playing with scrap metal and get a real job? You cannot seriously expect Clara to support your little hobby forever." The entire dining room went completely silent. Vanessa smirked, taking a slow sip of her drink. My parents stared down at their plates, saying absolutely nothing to defend us. Julian did not raise his voice. He did not get angry. He just reached under the table, took my hand, and looked Preston dead in the eye. "I build things that last, Preston," Julian said quietly. "You just buy things that are already made. There is a difference." Preston let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed off the dining room walls. He called Julian a glorified trash collector and told him to let the adults handle the real money. Right then and there, I wanted to flip the table and walk out into the cold night. But Julian just squeezed my hand, keeping me grounded. He gave me a look that said we did not need to prove anything to these people. What nobody at that table knew, especially the arrogant crypto millionaire laughing in our faces, was that the very scrap metal Julian was working with in our freezing warehouse was about to become worth more than Preston could ever imagine. But before the universe handed out its ultimate rewards, my family was going to make sure I suffered one last unforgettable betrayal. A betrayal so deep it would sever our bloodlines forever. 2 months after that miserable Thanksgiving dinner, Julian asked me to marry him. He did not rent out a restaurant or hire a hidden photographer. It happened on a freezing Tuesday night inside our drafty warehouse. The space smelled like sawdust and welding sparks. Julian walked up to me, his hands stained with grease, and knelt right there on the concrete floor. He held out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring he had forged himself from pure iron, heated and hammered for days until it was polished to look like dark, liquid glass. There was no diamond, no expensive brand name attached to it. It was just raw, undeniable effort and absolute devotion. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my entire life. I said yes with tears streaming down my face. We wanted something intimate and real. We picked a Saturday in mid-October, booked a beautiful little suburban church, and sent out 40 handmade invitations. I spent weeks carefully painting each envelope with watercolors. When I called my parents to tell them the date, their reaction was perfectly on brand. My mother asked how much the church cost, and my father simply said he would mark it on his calendar. No excitement, no joy, just a polite, sterile acknowledgement. But Vanessa did not say a word. She just read my text message in the family group chat and left me on read. I should have known right then that a silent Vanessa was a dangerous Vanessa. 3 weeks after my wedding invitations were mailed, a thick, heavy envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was stamped with expensive gold foil. I opened it and felt the blood entirely drain from my face. It was an invitation to the Sterling family gender reveal party. The venue was a massive luxury super yacht rented out in the city harbor. The date was the exact same Saturday as my wedding. The time was the exact same hour. My hands shook as I dialed my sister. She picked up on the second ring, her voice dripping with that sickly, sweet, fake innocence she had perfected over the years. "Oh my God, Clara," she gasped before I could even finish my sentence. "I completely forgot your little church thing was that weekend. Preston already paid the deposit on the yacht, and it was the only weekend the rental company had available. But your wedding is just a tiny casual gathering, right? You guys can just easily move it to next month. No big deal. No big deal." She was asking me to cancel my wedding venue, my caterer, and tell all my friends to change their flights, simply because Preston Sterling wanted to shoot pink or blue confetti off a boat. I told her absolutely not. I told her my wedding date was set, and I expected my family to be there. That is when the true psychological warfare began. The next morning, my mother called me. She did not call to apologize for Vanessa. She called to completely manipulate me. "Clara, please be reasonable about this," my mother sighed, using the tone you would use to scold a difficult toddler. "Vanessa is carrying the very first Sterling grandchild. Preston has important investors flying in for this party. You know your sister gets incredibly stressed. Why are you trying to ruin her special moment by forcing people to choose?" I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Mom, I sent my invitations out weeks ago. She chose this date on purpose. Are you seriously going to skip your own daughter's wedding for a party on a boat?" My mother dropped the fake sweet voice. Her tone turned instantly cold and sharp. "Listen to me, Clara. Your wedding is barely a real event. You are wearing a dress you sewed yourself, and you are marrying a man who plays with scrap metal. You can do that on any given Tuesday. We cannot miss the biggest moment of your sister's life. Change your date, or you will be standing there alone." She hung up on me. I sat on the floor of the warehouse and sobbed until I could barely breathe. But there was one last string I was desperately holding on to: my father. He had promised me since I was a little girl that he would be the one to walk me down the aisle. I called him. He picked up, sounding incredibly nervous. "Dad," I choked out, "you are still coming to walk me down the aisle, right? You promised me." There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that slowly crushes your spirit before a single word is even spoken. "Clara, sweetheart," he stammered, "your mother is really upset. Let me talk to her. We will figure it out. I will call you right back tonight." He never called back. I tried calling him the next day. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him. Left on read. The man who was supposed to be my protector chose to bury his head in the sand because he was too terrified to stand up to his wealthy son-in-law and his manipulative wife. Over the next 2 weeks, the RSVP cards started rolling in. Every single one from my aunts, uncles, and cousins had the exact same box checked. No. They were all going to the yacht. They made their choice. And as I stared at the stack of rejections, the tears finally stopped falling. The sadness burned away, leaving absolutely nothing but cold, hardened clarity. I was going to walk down that aisle, even if I had to do it in front of empty chairs. But what I did not know was that someone else was watching this entire tragedy unfold. Someone who was about to step out of the shadows and change everything. The morning of October 14th arrived, and the sky opened up. It was not a gentle autumn drizzle. It was a heavy, relentless storm. Maya, my best friend since college, was in the tiny bridal room of the church, carefully pinning my hair up. She did not ask about my mother. She did not mention my sister. She just held my shaking hands and told me I looked absolutely beautiful. When the time came, I walked out to the foyer of the church. The large wooden doors to the sanctuary were pushed open. I looked down the aisle, and my heart shattered into a million sharp pieces. 35 folding chairs sat completely empty. Only 7 people were in that room. Maya, a few of Julian's friends from the metal shop, and my former college roommate. Not a single person who shared my last name had bothered to show up. Not an aunt, not a cousin, not my mother, and worst of all, not my father. The string quartet I hired began to play the procession music. The notes echoed off the high ceiling, making the empty room feel even larger and more hollow. I stood at the edge of the aisle, clutching my bouquet, my vision blurred with tears. I was about to take my first step entirely alone, forced to swallow the absolute humiliation of being the daughter who was not worth a 30-minute drive. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and lifted my foot. Wait. A voice echoed from the heavy wooden doors behind me. It was a deep, gravelly voice, commanding enough to make the string quartet completely stop playing. I turned around and my jaw almost hit the floor. It was Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was the elderly, quiet man who owned the warehouse where Julian and I lived. He was a notoriously private guy. We usually only saw him sweeping the driveway in old flannel shirts and scuffed work boots. He barely spoke more than 2 words to us when he came to collect the rent. But the man standing in the doorway of the church was not wearing flannel. Arthur was dressed in a pristine, immaculate vintage black tuxedo. His silver hair was perfectly combed back. He held a high-end black umbrella in one hand, dripping with rain, and he carried an aura of absolute authority that commanded the entire room. He walked slowly toward me. His footsteps echoed heavily on the stone floor. He stopped right in front of me and looked down at my face, his sharp eyes softening as he saw my tears. "Your father is a deeply foolish man," Arthur said softly, "and if he does not have the sense to realize the incredible value of the daughter standing right in front of him, then he does not deserve the honor of walking her down this aisle." I stared at him, completely stunned. I could not form a single word. Arthur gently lifted his right arm and offered it to me. "I am just a grumpy old landlord," Arthur continued, a small, kind smile breaking across his face. "But if you would allow me the absolute privilege, Clara, I would be deeply honored to walk you to your future." A sob tore from my throat, not a sob of sadness, but of pure, overwhelming relief. I reached out and wrapped my arm tightly around his. The music started again, and side by side, Arthur Pendleton and I walked down the aisle. I looked up at the altar. Julian was standing there, wiping tears from his own eyes. He knew exactly how much pain my family had caused me, and seeing Arthur step in to protect me broke down every single emotional wall Julian had left. When Arthur handed me over to Julian, he firmly shook my husband's hand and whispered something in his ear. I did not hear what it was at the time, but Julian nodded with absolute, profound respect. We said our vows right there in front of those empty chairs. We promised to choose each other, to fight for each other, and to never let anyone make us feel small again. When Julian slid that raw iron ring onto my finger, the 35 empty chairs did not matter anymore. That day taught me the most painful but necessary lesson of my entire life. Family is not defined by blood. Blood is just an accident of birth. True family is defined by the people who choose to stand in the freezing rain with you when it would be so much easier to walk away. We left that church feeling like we had conquered the world. We had absolutely no idea that the real victory was just beginning. Because the quiet, elderly landlord who walked me down the aisle was not just a nice old man. Arthur Pendleton was holding a massive secret, and that secret was about to completely shatter Preston Sterling's fragile ego and turn my arrogant family completely upside down. 2 weeks after the wedding, life seemed to go back to normal. We were still eating cheap pasta in our freezing warehouse, and we were still completely ignored by the Vance family. Not a single person had called to ask how the wedding went. I was a ghost to them. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, Arthur knocked on the heavy metal door of our studio. He was not there to collect the rent. He was holding a sleek, vintage leather briefcase. He walked in, asked us to clear a space on the workbench, and told us to sit down. He looked at Julian, took a slow breath, and finally revealed the massive secret he had been keeping for over a year. Arthur Pendleton was not just a grumpy old landlord. 20 years ago, Arthur was one of the most ruthless, successful, and elite private art brokers in the world. He used to run a legendary gallery in Manhattan, curating private collections for billionaires, European royalty, and technology titans. He had retired to the outskirts of Seattle to escape the exhausting high society life, buying our warehouse simply because he liked the quiet. But he had been watching Julian every single day. For the past 6 months, Arthur had been quietly taking photographs of Julian's newest collection. It was a series of massive iron and copper sculptures called the Empty Spaces. They were haunting, beautiful, towering figures forged from scrap metal, representing the physical weight of abandonment. Julian had literally poured all the pain of my family's rejection into that burning metal, turning our heartbreak into pure art. Arthur opened his leather briefcase and slid a thick stack of legal papers across our scratched wooden table. "I sent your portfolio to a very old client of mine," Arthur said casually, resting his hands on the table. "He is a technology magnate based in Switzerland. He has been looking for contemporary work that feels raw, something real. He took one look at your sculptures, Julian, and he decided he did not want to buy just one. He bought the entire collection." I leaned forward and stared at the paperwork. The bold black numbers printed on the contract made the entire room spin. $500,000, $500,000, paid in full, up front. And attached to it was a binding contract for 3 more installations over the next 2 years. Julian was completely speechless. He looked down at his calloused, grease-stained hands, and then he looked at me with tears welling in his eyes. The man my family called a trash collector, the man Preston Sterling humiliated at the Thanksgiving table, was just validated as a generational talent by one of the wealthiest art collectors on the planet. But Arthur was not finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick linen envelope. He pushed it across the table toward me. "My client also heard that you two just got married," Arthur said, his sharp eyes twinkling with a hint of a smile. "He happens to own a private cliffside villa on the Amalfi coast in Italy. It is fully staffed and currently sitting empty. He absolutely insists you take it for the next 2 weeks as a signing bonus and a late honeymoon. The private flights are already booked." I covered my mouth, tears of pure shock streaming down my face. I could not breathe. For my entire life, my family worshipped Preston Sterling because he flashed his volatile cryptocurrency wealth in their faces. They completely sold their souls and their loyalty for designer handbags and rented yacht parties. But Julian and I did not have to sell our souls. Julian built our future with his bare hands, out of the very scrap metal my family despised. 3 days later, we were sitting in first class, flying across the Atlantic Ocean. When we finally arrived at the Amalfi coast, I stepped out onto the pristine marble terrace of the billionaire villa. The Mediterranean Sea stretched out infinitely in front of me, sparkling under the golden Italian sun. I was completely at peace. But as I stood there holding a glass of champagne, I realized something else. It was finally time to let my family know exactly what they threw away. For my entire life, I have been a quiet, reserved person. I never bragged, I never posted flashy things on social media, and I certainly never tried to compete with Vanessa and her rented luxury lifestyle. But standing on that breathtaking terrace in Amalfi, looking at Julian's sketch in a leather notebook with the ocean breeze blowing past him, I decided to break my own rule. Just once. I took out my phone and snapped a single picture. The framing was completely effortless but totally devastating. The background was the sweeping, beautiful view of the Italian coast and the edge of our private infinity pool. In the foreground, resting on a marble table next to 2 glasses of expensive local wine, was the thick, glossy exhibition catalog that Arthur had printed for Julian. The title was printed in bold gold letters, "The Empty Spaces." Original works by Julian Hayes, sold in its entirety to the European private collection. I did not tag my location, I did not write a long, bitter paragraph about my wedding. I just typed a very simple caption, celebrating my incredible husband and his massive international commission. Thank you to the people who truly believed in us when no one else did. I hit post. I turned my phone completely off, dropped it into my woven beach bag, and went to enjoy a romantic Italian dinner with the love of my life. I did not turn my phone back on until late the next morning. When I finally pressed the power button while drinking a fresh espresso on the balcony, the screen completely froze for a solid 10 seconds. It could not even process the sheer volume of notifications flooding in at once. 512 missed calls, text messages, and direct messages. The exact same family members who could not be bothered to send a single text message on the day of my wedding were suddenly blowing up my phone like it was a national emergency. I scrolled through the messages, taking a slow sip of my espresso, and I actually started to laugh. It was not a bitter laugh. It was the deep, genuine laugh of someone who was finally completely free. My mother sent 14 text messages. Clara, honey, are you in Italy? Oh my goodness, your father and I are so incredibly proud of Julian. We always knew he was so talented. When you get back, we absolutely must take you out to a celebratory dinner at the country club. We always knew he was talented. I read that line twice. The woman who hid his handmade iron gift behind a napkin holder suddenly wanted to be his biggest fan and parade him around her country club. Then there was Vanessa. She called 8 times. Her texts started out sweet, then quickly spiraled into panicked, frantic jealousy. Clara, whose house is that? Wait, did Julian actually sell his scrap metal art? How much did he get? Clara, answer me right now. This is important. Even my aunts and cousins, the exact same people who checked no on my wedding invitations to go drink champagne on Preston Sterling's rented boat, were suddenly filling my inbox with fake apologies. They were suddenly claiming they had just been so incredibly busy lately and missed me so much. And finally, my father. He left one single voicemail. Clara, please call your dad. We really miss you. I sat there, looking out at the beautiful Italian coastline, listening to the desperate, greedy voices of the people who had completely abandoned me in the freezing rain. For the first time in 28 years, I did not feel the urge to please them. I did not feel the need to explain myself, argue with them, or demand an apology. I just opened every single message, making absolutely sure my read receipts were turned on so they all knew I saw their desperate attempts to crawl back into my life. And then I did the most powerful, destructive thing a person can do to toxic, manipulative family members. I put my phone down and I gave them absolute, deafening silence. But my silence was nothing compared to the massive storm that was about to hit the Vance family. Because while Julian and I were securing our financial future with hard work and real talent, Preston Sterling's fragile empire of lies was about to completely implode. 3 months after Julian and I returned from Italy, the absolute illusion of the Vance family completely shattered. It did not happen slowly. It happened overnight. Preston Sterling, the golden son-in-law, the man who bought the loyalty of my family with expensive wine and luxury cars, was not a brilliant investor after all. He was a complete and absolute fraud. His cryptocurrency hedge fund was exposed by federal investigators as a massive, elaborate Ponzi scheme. The news broke on a random Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, the government had stepped in and completely frozen every single one of his bank accounts. The luxury matte black SUV he bought for Vanessa was repossessed right out of their driveway. The rented superyacht lifestyle vanished into thin air. Vanessa, the woman who obsessively posted every single detail of her wealthy life on the internet, went completely, desperately silent. Her social media empire crumbled the second the stolen money dried up. But the absolute worst part of the fallout did not hit Preston. It hit my parents. You see, my parents did not just worship Preston because he was rich. They worshipped him because they desperately wanted to be rich too. Behind closed doors, without ever telling me, my father had taken out a massive second mortgage on my childhood home. He took every single penny of his retirement savings and handed it directly over to Preston to invest in the fraudulent crypto fund. My parents had bet their entire future on the arrogant man who mocked my husband, and now that money was completely gone. The bank was threatening to foreclose on their house. They were facing absolute financial ruin. And suddenly, the daughter they abandoned at the altar, the daughter married to the wealthy international artist, looked like their only way out. My phone started ringing again. But this time, it was not fake congratulations. It was pure, unfiltered panic. My mother left a voicemail, sobbing uncontrollably. Clara, please, you have to help us. We are going to lose the house. Preston ruined absolutely everything. We have nothing left. Please talk to Julian. You guys have so much money now from his art. You are family, Clara. You have to save us. You are family. I sat in the living room of the beautiful, quiet new home Julian and I had just bought with his art commissions. I listened to the desperate tears of my mother echoing through the speaker of my phone. For a brief, fleeting second, a wave of pity washed over me. They were my parents. They were about to lose their home. A weaker version of me, the terrified version from a year ago, would have immediately written them a massive check to finally buy their love and approval. But I was not that girl anymore. The cold rain from my wedding day had completely washed away my need for their validation. They did not want a daughter. They just wanted an ATM. I knew I could not just ignore them forever. It was time to finally face them. I picked up my phone and sent a single text message to my mother, telling her and my father to meet me at a local coffee shop the next morning. I knew exactly what I had to do. It was going to be the absolute hardest conversation of my entire life, but I was finally ready to draw the final line in the sand. I walked into the coffee shop the next morning. My parents were already sitting in a corner booth. They looked like they had aged 10 years in a single week. My father was staring down at the table, completely unable to look me in the eye. My mother looked frail and desperate, her hands physically shaking as she gripped her paper coffee cup. I sat down across from them. I did not order a drink. I did not make small talk. I just looked at the two people who were supposed to protect me my entire life. Clara, my mother started, her voice immediately breaking into a sob. Thank you so much for coming. We are so incredibly desperate right now. If Julian could just give us a small loan from his art money, we promise we will pay every single penny back. We just need to save the house from foreclosure. I let her finish. I did not raise my voice. I did not yell, and I did not cry. I just looked at her with complete, absolute calm. Mom, I said softly, I am not going to write you a check. I am not going to ask my husband to pay for the massive financial mistakes you made while worshiping a man who openly humiliated him. My father's head finally snapped up. Clara, please, he begged, his voice trembling. We are your family. I looked right into his eyes, the exact same eyes of the man who promised to walk me down the aisle and then completely abandoned me for a party. You made your choice about who your family is on October 14th, Dad, I told him, my voice steady and completely unshaken. You chose Vanessa. You chose Preston. You chose the fake illusion of wealth over your own daughter. You let me stand in the freezing rain with 35 empty chairs. I am not angry anymore. I do not even hate you. But I am absolutely never going to let you use my husband's success to fix the mess you made. I stood up from the table. My mother started to weep loudly, reaching out across the table to grab my hand, but I gently pulled it away. I wish you both the best, I said, but I am completely done. I turned around and walked out the door. When I pushed open the glass doors of the coffee shop, the crisp morning air hit my face, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, utterly weightless. I never spoke to them again. My parents ended up losing the house in foreclosure. They had to pack up decades of memories and move into a tiny, cramped apartment on the other side of the city. Preston and Vanessa are currently drowning in massive legal fees, their fake luxury empire reduced to absolute rubble. And Julian and I? We do not live in that drafty warehouse anymore. We bought a beautiful, quiet farm just outside the city. Julian built a massive metal workshop in the back where he prepares his international gallery pieces, and I spend my days restoring beautiful antique books in my sunroom. Every single Sunday, Arthur Pendleton drives over to have dinner with us. We sit around a large, hand built wooden table, eating good food, laughing loudly, and sharing a life surrounded only by the people who truly love us. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it is this: the absolute best, most elegant revenge you can ever take on toxic people is your own peace. You do not need to scream at them. You do not need to ruin their lives. You just need to build a life so incredibly beautiful, so secure, and so full of genuine love that they do not even have the clearance to enter it. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you made it this far, you are part of the family now. Tell me in the comments below, do you think I should have helped my parents financially? Or did I do the exact right thing by walking away? I read every single comment, so let me know your thoughts. If this story helped you realize your own worth, please hit that subscribe button before you go. Remember to protect your peace, know your value, and never ever settle for empty chairs.